Hey, what's up guys, it's Theo from Concept. So this is going to be a beginner's guide to motion graphics using After Effects. We've already created one which involves graphic design and Adobe Photoshop. So in case you haven't checked that out, I'll have it linked in the description below. It's actually going to be the first link, so be sure to check it out. Before I get started, if you like this video or you found a problem with the sound, or probably I was too fast, or probably there was something I didn't cover and you wanted me to, just let me know in the comments below because I need that feedback from you. And be sure to like it if you enjoyed it. Apart from that, like I said, this is going to just be a beginner's guide, so I'll not be going so in-depth into certain things. But if you want any clarification on some parts of the video, just let me know in the comments below and I'll create a dedicated video on that. Alright, so now that I have all of that out, I think we should just get started. Welcome to Concept. Click the subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you don't miss out on any of our future videos. Alright, so let's go ahead to open up our application. For this tutorial, I'm using Adobe After Effects 2018, and you can pretty much get away with the CS6 version. I think everything I'm going to talk about in this video is also going to apply to that as well. So the moment the application is open up, you are greeted with this window, and you can see that I've already created some number of projects. So I'm just going to ignore all of them and create a new project for this tutorial. So I click on new project. Now once you have that, you have to create a new composition. But before we get into the new composition, let's talk about the interface of Adobe After Effects. Alright, so first things first, over at the top here where we have the normal software options, we have the file, the edit, composition, layer, effects, animation, so on and so forth up to help. Basically, this is going to allow you to have some more options if you want. And there are several windows also here. You can see we have the project window, we have the effects and controls, we have the effects and presets, we have the preview, the align, and all of that good stuff. Now, everything you see here are called windows. They are basically the various tabs which allow you to access certain options for your work. So you can see we have the project window, we have the effect controls window, we have the effects and presets, we have the timeline window, we have the render queue window, we have the audio, the paints, the brushes, align and preview. So there are a bunch of them. In case you don't find what you want here, just go to window and make sure that is checked over here. So if I go ahead and click on paragraph is also going to be added in there. Now the third part about this is you can actually click and drag this and drop it wherever you want. Immediately you see the blue line, you can actually drop it in there. The first side, my effects and presets isn't actually supposed to be here. It is usually somewhere at the bottom over here, so yours should look something like this, but I prefer having mine over to the left, so I'll just click and drag and drop it over here. Now you see this blue mark here, that means I can actually drop it here. If I bring it over to this end, it means I can also drop it here, but I'm not going to be dropping that here. I'll just put it somewhere here, and that is looking pretty nice. I also like to have my align tab underneath my effects and presets, so I'm going to drop it just beneath that. Something like this should look just fine. You can also stretch it out to whatever size you want, and basically that's it. In case you want to alter this shape too, like the paragraph, you can also click and drag and drop it on top of the brushes, and basically you can add in as many as you want until you are content with what you have. Now in case you want to change the entire layout, just go to window, go to workspaces, and under that click on any of these presets. So if I go to animation, After Effects is just going to analyze and try to determine which windows I should be using, or which windows it thinks I should be using for animation. The same way I can go for color and it's going to change the whole preset for me. And I can also go to I don't know, essential graphics, so on and so forth. There are basically so many things you can also do with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to set to all panels. Now that I have all of that, I'm just going to be deleting the ones I don't need. So for brushes, I don't think I'll ever need this. For paint, I'll also close it up, but you can close it up using these 3 strips of lines. For preview is very important, so I'm just going to leave it in here. I also want my character window, so I'll just go to window, make sure character is also there, character. That is it, and I'll place that beneath my paragraph. Let's go ahead and just stretch it out so I have all of that looking pretty nice. Now I don't know, I'll just go to window again to see if there are other things I need. So I think that is all for now. Usually your render queue will not be there, so as your timeline. So in case your timeline is also not there, just go to window and make sure that timeline is checked, which I should find somewhere here. And the same way I'll also add the render queue. This is going to be the last part when we are actually rendering our video. So basically that is how the whole interface is going to be from now on. This is how I like to set mine, so you can go ahead and create yours like this, or just make it any way you feel comfortable with. Alright, now since we are in our new project window, let's go ahead and create a composition. A composition is actually going to be how we want our video to look like. If you want it to be 60 frames per second, if you want it in 4K, this is how you have to create it. So I click on new composition. Make sure I have my composition name, so I'm just going to leave it as comp1. I'll not be going into advanced and 3D rendering, I'll just stick with basic. And I have a custom preset which is 1920 by 1080. I want my video size to be 1080p. In case you want it to be 4K, you have to use something like 2160, or for the height and the width, I'm not even sure, so I'm just going to ignore that. I want mine to be 1080 because that is what my computer can keep up. And I usually set this to square pixels because I don't know, I've actually not checked what the other ones do. And I want my frame rate to be 24 frames per second so that I have some form of motion blur when I add it in later on. I want my resolution to be half. I'll be explaining this once we get into the whole work. That way you get a better understanding of which resolution I'm talking about. The start code, I usually leave it as 000 for the beginning, and the duration I want it to be 5 seconds. For the background color, you can just click on this rectangle box here and select which color you want. So whatever color you select, you have a small naming or illustration of which color that is going to be over at the bottom. I'm going to set this to solid white. You can also make it black, but I'm just going to leave it as solid white and click on OK, and I'll click on OK one more time. So this is how the video is going to be inside this rectangle over here. So there are a bunch of things you can do when you are opening up a project in After Effects. You can double click, make sure that you are in the project window, not Effects and Controls, project window. You can double click here to open up a new project. So if I have one here like Instagram project and all of that stuff, I can just import it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to cancel. You can also just go to File and go to Open Project. And basically you have to close this one up before you can open a new project, because you can't open another project on top of the other, just one project at a time. Or you can just click on this new composition icon and just create a new composition from whatever it is you want. You can also import Adobe Photoshop files like PSD files. You can also import Adobe Illustrator files, so that's going to be .ai in here, and then just animate it the way you want, but that's going to be a tutorial for another day. So basically that's going to be your first look at importing files. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about timeline. The timeline is always going to be at the bottom unless you actually change it. Now this is the playhead. You move through the time at the bottom and your animation is going to be playing over here. This is going to be the preview window. Now you remember we set our duration to 5 seconds, so that is what we have here, from 0 to 5 seconds, and this is going to be a half of a second, this is going to be 1 second, and so on and so forth. So everything we are going to create is going to be in here. In case you are familiar with Photoshop, where you have your layers, everything is also going to be created in here, just one layer on top of the other, and the one which is on top is going to show first before the one which is beneath, just like layers in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and look at the tools. So for your tools, they are basically going to be at the top left corner over here, unless you change it obviously. So for the first one, which is the selection tool, is basically for selecting objects on your composition. The hand tool allows you to just move your workspace around very neatly. The magnification tool, you already know that, but you can also use the scroll wheel on your mouse, so zoom in, zoom out, all of that stuff. I'm going to set mine to 100%, so that's what we do here. Now there was something about resolution I was talking about earlier. This is where you set it. So I set mine to half because I'm actually recording this screen, and if I set it to full and I'm animating something quite heavy, my computer is going to slow down. So I'm going to set the resolution to half, but that doesn't mean if you set it to half, when it's rendering, it is actually going to save it as half. It is going to be at full resolution. You can also set it to quarter in case you have like a 4 gig RAM dual core computer or something of that sort. I'm just going to leave mine as half for this. Alright, and we also have the rotation tool, we have the camera. I wish I could talk about this in this video, but that's another tutorial for another time. We have the anchor point tool, also known as the pan behind tool. We have the shapes tool where you can create rectangles, circles, ellipses, all of that stuff. The pen tool, the type tool, the brush, clone stamp, so on and so forth. I'm not going to be going through all of that because this video is going to be quite lengthy if I do that. Now, in case you didn't notice, also if I select a tool, we have the toolbar over here. So every tool I select is going to show a different form of options up here. So if I grab the hand tool, you realize that there's actually no two options for the hand tool. That's why there's nothing here. If I grab the magnifying tool, same thing. If I grab the anchor point tool, you realize that we have the snapping. I can check to snap objects. If I grab the shapes tool, I can actually select the stroke and the fill and how big the stroke should be and all of that stuff. The type tool is also going to give me a bunch of options, but most of them is going to be in the character options and the paragraph options. So you know what, let me just stretch it out. So for the type tool, most of everything I'm going to do is going to be in the character window right here, the brush tool, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and create something. I'm actually going to grab the rectangle tool. Now, in case you want a different form of tools, you have to click and hold, unlike Photoshop where you just have to right click. For Adobe Illustrator and After Effects, you have to click and hold and you select which tool you want. So if I want an ellipse, I can just click on ellipse tool, click, and I can just get some ellipse like this. Whilst holding down shift is going to be a perfect circle. And you can see that the stroke is actually set to 84, so I have a stroke of 84 pixels here. The fill is a green color and the stroke is actually a red color. Something like this is pretty cool. But in case you want to change the color, you can just click on the fill color. I can make it I don't know, let's try yellow. And the stroke, I'm actually going to turn it down to something like, I don't know, 50 pixel. Now there's something I've noticed about After Effects and I'm not really a fan of. If I set, let me go back to the shapes tool. If I set my stroke to about 50 pixel, it's actually going to center the stroke. So that's going to be 25 pixel up and 25 pixel outside and 25 pixel inside. I'm not really a fan of that. I wish there was a way I can actually alternate this. In Photoshop, you can just make it you can make it 50 pixel all outside or 50 pixel all inside, or you can also change it to 25 out, 25 in. Those who have been watching my previous videos, I'm sure you understand what I mean, but I don't see that in After Effects since I started using it. In case you know any way of how I can go about this, please let me know in the comments below. I'll be more than happy to watch that. Alright, so obviously I'm not going to be creating an ellipse. I already said we'll be creating a rectangle. So I'll click and hold and go back to the rectangle tool, and I'm going to create a rectangle like this. Now I don't want a stroke, I actually want no stroke. So instead of clicking on this icon right here, I can actually click on the name stroke, the text itself, and I'll select the first preset, which is none, so that's no stroke at all, and I'll click on OK. And if I want a fill, I can also click on the color and I'll select the fill color I want. Then I can also click on OK. But for this part, I actually want no fill and stroke, so I'll go for the none for the fill, and I actually set my stroke to a solid black color, so that's 6 zeros, and the stroke size is actually going to be somewhere around 10 pixel, so 5 outside, 5 inside. Now if I press R on my keyboard, R is going to bring up the rotation for this shape. So you can see this is our first layer. If I go ahead and create another shape like this, you have to make sure that no layer is selected. So if I create another shape, that is also going to be on top. In case a layer is selected, that's actually going to be maxing it, which we'll talk about later in the video. Okay, so if I click on this arrow pointing to the right, I can actually go into transforms, and you can see we have the anchor point, we have the position, we have the scale, we have the rotation and opacity. Opacity for turning out how opaque this object should be, so currently set to 100%. Rotation, how to rotate this, the scale, increasing it, the position where you want to actually place this, and the anchor point where the reference point is also going to be. So currently you can, if I grab the anchor point 2, you can see that my anchor point is set to here. Now the anchor point, this is what it does. It is going to be the point of reference in case you are animating whatever object it is. So if I bring my anchor point somewhere around here and I go into rotate, if I try to rotate it, you realize that it rotates around that area, so it will be just rotating wherever direction I put it around that area. If I go back and grab my anchor point 2 and I place it somewhere around here and I try to rotate it, it's also going to be at that side. The same way if I try to scale it up or down, is also going to be scaling using that point as a reference point. I actually want mine to be at the center, so I'll quickly undo using Ctrl Z several times. Now if you want to place this at the center, you can just gauge with your eyes and do that, but if your eyes are not as perfect as mine, you can hold down the Ctrl key and double click on the anchor point 2, so that will just place it at the center for you. Pretty simple. So what I'll do is I'll actually play around the position. I want it to be somewhere here. To actually get this at the center perfectly, I'll actually be using the align window. In case you don't have this, just go to window, make sure that align is checked. So I'll click on this horizontal center alignment, it will place it horizontally for me, and I'll click on the vertical center alignment and it will place it directly at the center for me. So something like this is pretty cool. I'm also going to turn down the scale to something about 80, should be just fine, and I'm just going to play around the position. So this is going to be for the x-axis, which is the horizontal, and this is going to be the y-axis, which is the vertical. So if I go ahead and play with the horizontal, left and right, up and down. So let's undo and place this at the center one more time. Again, I'll just change the scale to 0. So I'll put this somewhere at the top, probably 440 somewhere here, and I'll just quickly hide them for now. Now for all the transform options, there are shortkeys for them. I'll be talking about them as we move on. So I'll grab type 2. Now in case you want to download fonts, I covered this in the previous video where we looked at graphic design and the use of Adobe Photoshop, so please check that out, and you see a bunch of websites I recommend you can download free fonts from. Now back to the video. Okay, so I'll create something quite simple like lesson 1. You actually can't see because my text is white and my background is also white. So I'll go into the character window, make sure I click on the first fill color, which is going to be the first color, and I'll set it to a solid black color. I'm actually using the font called Unisans Regular. I'll try and leave a link in the description below. I think I said this in the previous video, but I actually didn't, I forgot. So I'll do that. And I actually have my text set to all caps, so if I just uncheck it, you can see that they were actually typed in small letters. So I just set it back to all caps, and I'm also going to place this at the center. So align vertical and align horizontal and align vertical. Now you can see my anchor point is also somewhere here, so I'll hold down the Ctrl key and double click on my anchor point 2 to place it at the center like this. Now in case you want to change the position, just press P on your keyboard to bring up the position options, and I'll just move this to the top like this. So I think I don't actually like the size of my rectangle, so I'll select my shape tool, select the move tool. Sorry, this is actually the selection tool. I thought I was using Photoshop for a second. Then I'll just click and drag this somewhere around here. This is going to close it up. to something like this. Now the funny part is the moment you click and drag from one side, it's also going to do the same from here. You don't have to hold down the shift key or the alt key or both of them. It's actually going to do it automatically for you. So I think something like this is pretty damn awesome. Now I think the font is too damn huge, so I'll select that font and I'll reduce the number of pixels to around 72, and again I'll place it at the center. Press P on my keyboard to bring up the position, and I'll place this somewhere around here. I think since I've done this, I actually have to make this a little bit smaller again. Alright, so now that we have our first text, I'm actually going to add in another text. So I'll grab the type tool. You can use Ctrl T to bring it up, and I'll type in something like downloading, and sorry, let me use this N symbol, and installing. Oof, I can't spell today. I think this is just about right. So I'll align this also. Control double click on the pan anchor point tool. So let's start animating this. So I want this text, which is lesson 1, to come from the top and land over here. So what I'll do is I'll just move to the 1 second where I actually want the animation to stop. I'll select the layer, hit P on my keyboard. I already have that, so I'll create a keyframe for position, and that is going to create this diamond icon right here. If I click on it, you see that it's actually blue, and I'll move over to the beginning where I want it to start, and I'll just move this to the top like this. So it's going to move in when I play like so. Pretty damn neat. Now once I have done this also, I want downloading and installing to also be moving upwards but in the opposite direction, so I'll select that as well. But I don't want it to end at the 1 second. I actually want it to be probably 1.5 seconds. So I'll create a position keyframe, and I'll move over to the beginning and also alter the position. So I'll bring it down like this. Now once we have that done, let's talk about track math. Okay, now to use track math, just click on toggle switches and mode over here, and you should see mode track math parent. If you don't see any of these, just right click over here, right click on this bar, go to columns, and make sure modes parent, and I think that's all, modes and parent is checked. So you should see track math from here. Now what I want to do is I want this downloading and installing only to show at some specific space. So I'll move over to the beginning. So this is where I want it to show. Sorry, I'll move over to the end actually. Then I'll grab my shapes tool. I'll be using the rectangle tool for this. Make sure that no layer is selected, and create a rectangle over my text like this. I think I should probably pull this to the top. Now we can see because it is covering all my text. That is the goal behind this. You should make sure it is covering your text. So we'll go into the track math, which is over here. Make sure that the text is selected. Click from none and click on the shape we just created. That's shape layer 2, and it is only going to show there. So if I move this, you can see that it is hiding over at that area. The same applies if I change the position of the shape. So if I press P on my keyboard and change the position, it's only going to show at that area. Pretty nice trick. So it's one way of hiding and revealing your text. You can try that. Apart from that, we have the inverted mode, where it is not going to show at that place the shape is. It is only going to show everywhere else besides where that shape is. And basically that's also there, but that's not what I want. I actually want the alpha math version. Okay, so I click on toggle switches and mode. Now before we get into the effects and presets panel, there's something I actually want to add to my shape, so I'll quickly hide everything. That is this shape layer 1. In case you want to rename the shape or whatever layer it is, you don't double click, you just hit enter on your keyboard, then change it to whichever name you want. So I'll change mine to, and I'm actually going into the options. You see this add icon right here, it is also located at the top here. so you can use either of them. So I'll click on the add icon, go to trim part, and I want to create some form of animation for this. So let me quickly hide the transform options and go into the trim part options. So I'm going to create one for this. As the text is moving in, I want some form of animation to be going in as well. So I also start at the 1, I'll also end at the 1 second check mark. We have the end and we have the start. You can't actually see because that layer is still selected. Let me zoom out a little bit. So if I go ahead and play around the end keyframe, sorry, the start keyframe, you can see how it is looking like, and the end keyframe is also like this. So I think I prefer having it at the end keyframe because I want it to be moving this way to the end like that. So I'll start off with 100%. That is going to be the end, and I'll create a keyframe for that, and I'll go to the beginning. So the beginning should be at 0%, so it's going to look something like this, and once it gets to the end, everything is going to fill in quite neatly, and I'll just hide that. So let's fit this back to screen. Now let's go to the effects and presets. There are a bunch of things I want to add to this, especially the background, the white background. I'm not really a fan of it, so we are going to create a new layer on top of all of these layers. Actually, it's going to be beneath all of these images. So just right click, go to new, and click on solid. So we want to have a solid color. I actually want it to be white, so I select a white color and click on OK, and click on OK one more time. So because this solid layer is on top of everything, you can't see, so I'll just click and drag it to the bottom, and I'll actually rename it by hitting enter and call this background. Now I want to add some form of effect to the background I just created. So I'll go into the effects and presets window, and I'll search for an effect called gradient ramp. So I'll just type ramp and gradient ramp should come. Now if I want to apply this, make sure that that layer is selected, and I'll double click on it and it is going to apply. In case you don't want to go through that process too, you can just click and drag and drop it onto that layer you want to apply it, and that is going to do the same thing for you. So currently it's set to linear ramp. I'm just going to change it to radial ramp, and I'll go ahead and click and drag this to the center like this. Now I actually want it to be black on the sides and white at the center, but right now we have black at the center and white at the sides. So what you do is just click on swap colors, and it's just going to invert the colors for you. Pretty easy. Now you can go ahead and just click on this edge and stretch it out to make it fade a little bit more. You can also just continue stretching it out from here, and probably that's what I'm going to do. I can actually even type it in, so let's try negative 7,000. Just click on OK. I think that is a little bit too much. Let's make it negative 4,000 instead. Okay, so we have that nice looking. Now you can see if I turn it off and on, we have that nice looking animation. Now there are a bunch of presets and effects. I can't actually go through all of them. So basically, let's see our animation so far. Now obviously this is still showing, so you can also play with the opacity. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make it come in over somewhere around here. So to bring up the opacity keyframe, just hit T on your keyboard, so T for opacity, and I'll create a keyframe for that. I'll move over to the beginning and make sure that it is checked to 0. So it is going to fade in from 0, then it just starts in like this. Pretty damn nice. So this is what I'm actually going to be using for the transition between the videos. So in case you see that this is how we created it, and it is going to last for about 5 seconds. So that is all for this. Now there are other things like blending modes. So you know what, let's just create one. Let's click and hide that. So I'll grab I don't know, let's try the pen tool, and I'll create a shape like this. I want to have some form of reflection effect over here. Hit enter on my keyboard to confirm. Now you can see the fill color is set to yellow and the stroke is set to none. I'm actually going to change this to a white color and click on OK. So I just go into my layers options right here. I'll click on this arrow, go into content, and you can see we have our shape 1 here, and these are the blending modes for that shape itself. You also have the blend modes for the stroke, you have for the fill, and so on and so forth. You can go ahead and actually be changing them. But since this is white, I'm not getting any effect. It's actually white on white, and that's okay. So what I'm going to do is actually change the opacity. So I'll hit T on my keyboard and reduce the opacity to something like I don't know, somewhere around 25. Let's actually try 20 and hit on OK. It's actually covering up the entire screen. I actually want to animate this, so by the time this thing is done, somewhere around 3 seconds, so I'll create a position keyframe. So I'll hit P on my keyboard to bring up position, create a keyframe, move over to the beginning, and I'll change the x-axis. So I'll place this somewhere around here, and I also create a scale keyframe for that. So bring it up by hitting S on the keyboard, and I'll actually make it much bigger, making sure it is covering up the entire screen. I'll create a keyframe for that. Now I want to bring up the keyframes for both the position and the scale, so I'll hit U on my keyboard. That's going to bring up both of them. So I'll go to the 3 seconds check mark, and I'll reduce the scale to 100%. So you have this nice looking animation is going to be sliding in like this. I think for the position I can even stretch it out a little bit more. So still at the 3 second, I'm just going to be moving over to the edge, like probably like this should be just fine. So let me uncheck any of the layers so that you can see what is going on. So something like this is pretty damn good. Now there are a bunch of things you can do with the keyframes. The most common one is going to be the easy ease options. So this allows you to actually make adjustment to how fast the object is going to move. So if I select this shape we have in here, like so, let's select one that is quite fast, so like the rectangle stroke we created. If I press U on my keyboard to bring up the keyframes and select one of the keyframes, we click on this speed editor or graph editor right here. You click on it and you can see that it is moving in one linear line. We don't want this, we want to make it more dramatic. So what you can do is I'll actually select both layers or both keyframes, right click and go to keyframe assistant, and under that I'll click on easy ease. The short key is F9 by the way, so I'll be using F9 for the rest of this tutorial. And you have this form of, it looks like double triangles with one facing down and another facing the top, and basically that's it. So once you select that keyframe with the easy ease option, now go into the graph editor and now you can see it changes to something like this. I'm actually going to change to my selection tool so that the pen tool doesn't confuse you. In case you don't have something like this, right click anywhere here and make sure that edit speed graph is there. It's probably set to edit edit value graph, so make sure it is set to edit speed graph. This way you'll be able to edit how this is going to move. So I want it to move very fast, then slow down at the latter part. So I just click and drag this to the edge like this. So you can see it is going very fast. It gets to a peak of about 400% per second. Then it slows down to the end. So if I go ahead and play this, this is how it is looking like. Pretty. Now take a look at the rectangle stroke. That is a shape. You see that it moves very fast, then it slows down. Pretty damn nice. So that is basically what I'm going to do for everything. So I'll click on this one more time. Now you can also add what we call the motion blur. So I'll go back to toggle switches and modes. In case you are in this, you just click on that and you come back to this. Make sure that motion blur is checked, the options is checked, and you can virtually add it to anything else in here. We have the 3D option, but that's a tutorial for another day. I don't want to confuse you too much with this. So everything is going to be moving very fast and you have some form of motion blur. So this is going to be before. If I move in, you can see all the text very nicely. Now consider adding the motion blur to everything and it's going to look something like this. So that's what I'm going to do for all of this. I'm going to make sure I select all of them, hit U on my keyboard to bring up the keyframes, select all the keyframes, hit F9 to easy ease them, go into the editor. Sorry, I think I should be doing them one after the other so that it doesn't confuse me. I just click and drag. I prefer having them coming in very fast and slow later on. And this doesn't mean you can't select more than one keyframe. So I can select a bunch of them like this and I can just stretch them out like so. Okay, so this will apply to all of them, and basically this is how it is going to look like when we are done with the whole thing. Now that we have a fair idea of how After Effects is going to work, I want to talk to you a little bit about pre-composing. So what pre-composing is basically like smart objects in Photoshop. So if I have probably, let's grab these two shapes, I can pre-compose them by right clicking and go to pre-compose and make sure that move all attributes into the new composition is checked. You can have a new name for that and just click on OK. So this is going to put all of them into one specific video. So at any point in time, if I double click, I'll have access to all of these. So let's just say I get bored at some point and I want to change the text. I can actually change it to, I don't know, let's say Leon or something. If I come back to my main comp, you realize that it changes from here. This is quite important in case you don't want to be messing around so many layers. You can just select as many as you want. You pre-compose them just like smart objects in Photoshop. I actually don't want this, so I'll go back to having my at lesson 1. But there's something I actually want to do, that is pre-composing everything. Then I'll be able to reverse it. So you can see currently if I move over to 3 seconds, then basically that is all. There's no form of animation anymore, then it just moves to 5 seconds. So I'm going to select every layer with the exception of the shape layer 3. The shape layer is actually the reflection, so let's just name it reflection. That is this thing we created with a pen tool. So I'll select all of these, right click, go to pre-compose and call this main work or something. Make sure all attributes are transferred to the new composition, click on OK. So this is how it is looking like. So I know that probably around 3 seconds all my animation is done, so I'll just cut it over here using the Alt bracket key. In case you don't want to use that, you can just click and drag to something like this, holding down the Alt key. Now I can also duplicate this by using Ctrl D, so that's going to duplicate for you. And I'm actually going to apply the time remapping option on it. So right click on the layer, go to time, go to enable time remapping. But before I do that, I'm actually going to reverse the time, so time reverse layer, click on that, and that's actually going to turn this around. So I'll probably place it somewhere around here. Now right click one more time, go to time, and this time I'm going to enable time remapping. So what this allows me to do is I can actually play with how the time should be. I can actually play with the whole timing of my animation just by clicking and dragging these diamond icons. So you can see initially it's going to play in like this. Once it is done, it's also going to fade in again, something like this, and just vanish from the screen. Alright, so let's move to saving our work. Now the first and most common one is just going to File and click on Save. This is going to save it as an AEF file, that's After Effects file, and I actually have to get a name for this, so let's call it Learn in One Video, and you click on Save. So if I go into my File Explorer, you can see that we have that file in here. So anytime I open it up, it's just going to open up this After Effects template for me, and I can make changes to it as much as I want. Pretty damn nice. The next thing is actually to export this as a video. So to export this as a video, go to composition and click on add to render queue. So if you click on add to render queue, that option is also going to pop up here. I have it next to my timeline, so I'm basically going to be talking about this. So currently it's set to best settings. I don't have any errors at the moment, so the output model is going to be lossless. If you click on that, you have other options you can choose from. Currently it's set to RGB because I want everything to show, and I'll just click on OK. And you have to actually select where you want to output this video to. So I'll click on that, and I actually have a folder called Fino Concepts Content Creations, and I actually place it here. So let's just call this lesson. I think that's too much. Let's just call it 1, and I'll click on OK. Once I've done that, I have to click on this render button, and it is going to render out for me. Now once you hear that sound, it means the rendering is complete. So I'll go back to my comp 1. Now in case you want to just render out a transparent background, like if you want to use it for a lower third or some title animation, make sure that you click on this icon right here, which is toggle transparency grid. So once you click that, it should be transparent. Mine isn't because I have a background on top of the composition. So if I go ahead and turn off the background, you can see that this whole thing is transparent. In case the background is off and I click on this, it is going to be using the composition background. So if I go to composition and click on composition settings, since the background is set to white, the same way if I change it to red, it is going to show that red color. But the moment I click on this toggle transparency grid, it is going to make it transparent. And this is quite awesome in case you want to use it for something, probably on top of an image or something. So let's go ahead and render this one out, and I'll show you how it also looks. So go to composition, add to render queue. Now the output module, you actually have to change it. You don't have to use the channels RGB or else it's not going to work. So click on RGB and go to RGB plus alpha. Now once you've done that, just click on OK, and also select the outputs folder. So in this case, I'm going to call this P1 for, let's actually make it T1 for transparent 1. Click on OK and click on render. Again, once you hear that sound, it is complete. So I'll go back to composition 1. Now in the last part, which I'm going to talk about, let's quickly turn the background black on, and I'll actually turn on the background as well. So you can also render this using the Adobe Media Encoder, which I'll actually recommend because when you render After Effects files up, they are extremely huge. So if I go into that folder where we just rendered our videos, you can see one is actually 700 megabytes. I can just right click and go to properties to show you in case you can see at the bottom of my screen. So you can see the size is 700 megabytes, which is so damn huge for a 5-second video. The T1 version is even going to be much ridiculously huge. That is almost 1 gigabyte. My hard drive is like 240 gig, so this is quite huge for me. So what I actually like doing, in case it is not for transparent background, I actually go to file and click on export. I should find export somewhere here, and I'll click on add to media, Adobe Media Encoder queue. So what that will do is it will open up Adobe Media Encoder, and it is going to allow me to render it out there, and the size is going to be reasonably small over at that end. So basically that's it. This is your first look at motion graphics using Adobe After Effects. So now you can see you can't actually blame me for using Media Encoder because it is actually much better for me than all the other rendering options. Alright, thank you for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to watch more of our videos, hit that subscribe button, and as always, don't forget to share with your family and friends. This is Theo from Final Concept, and I'll see you guys in the next one.